Here's another ACT must-know math video.
First topic and concept that you must make sure that you review and that you know for the ACTs is functions. Now, functions can mean a lot of things, but I want to just show the main three things you will absolutely see on every ACT question. Okay, so here I have a function which I have two functions. The first one is f of x equals x squared minus 3, and then the other one, g of x equals 3x plus 1. And this question wants me to find, we read this as f of g of x. Okay, so this was when, remember, we looked at the inside of the parentheses first. So we looked at the g of x inside. The g of x, well, what is that? Well, the g of x, as you saw here, that is actually this 3x plus 1. Okay, so essentially what we really are doing is we're saying find f of, and then instead of writing this parentheses and g of x, I'm just going to replace the g of x here with what it is, the 3x plus 1. So let me put that in there. Okay, now what do we do with that? Well, when they give you a function and they give you parentheses and they give you something inside, whatever they give you in the parentheses is what they want you to, well, they want you to look at the original function, the f, which was this x squared minus 3. Okay, and I'm going to write that for a second, x squared minus 3. But when they give you something to write, so they give you something in parentheses here, that means that they want you to replace this x. So what we do is just put a parentheses, and don't forget that since this x was squared, we have to have whatever we put in here also be squared. And then it was a minus 3 after, so I'm going to just write that. Now what I'm going to replace this x with is just simply the 3x plus 1. So I'll put a 3x plus 1 in there. Now you can notice that this whole parentheses is squared, so you're talking about one of those binomials times itself, or sometimes people call it FOIL method. And then when I get that, I'm going to subtract 3, and then I know this comes out to be a 9x squared, and then my terms, my outer terms, my inner terms are both 3x, so I'll add those to a 6x, and then the 1 times the 1 will have a plus 1. Then I have to subtract 3. So the final result, I do have a 9x squared plus the 6x, and then when I do 1 minus 3, I have a negative 2. So that's how you do that kind. Taking the same f of x and g of x, this time they'll ask you to find f of g, and instead of saying just x, they have a number here. Okay, these are when, now we're still working from the inner function out. When it says g of parentheses negative 2, okay, when it says g of negative 2, okay, this means we're going to look at the g formula up here, the function, and that function is 3x plus 1. Okay, so I'm going to have a 3x plus 1. But just like I did before, when they give me something in the parentheses, I'm going to write the function, the 3x plus 1, but instead of writing the x, I'm going to write parentheses, and then a plus 1, and then in the parentheses, well, they want me to put in a negative 2, so I will. That means I'm going to multiply the 3 and the negative 2, getting negative 6 and a 1, which equals the negative 5. Now, a third very common questions with functions, again using the same f of x and g of x, is they'll ask you to find the value of x when it equals 8. They want to find what that is. So just glancing back, how does that relate? We found when we did this, we did f of g of a negative 2, and we ended up getting a negative 5. So imagine if they were giving this, but they didn't give you what was inside, and they just called that an x. And so they want to know, wait, so what did I need to put in to get that negative 5? Okay, so that's our goal right here. Now the way to do this, we're actually combining what we did in the first one, which you look at. Remember we had an f of g of x. Well, I'll go over it more cleanly here. So what we do is we have this g of x there, right? We're going to go back and we're going to plug that into the F formula, okay? So the F formula, remember, this was the, up here, x squared minus 3. But I don't want to put the x squared, I want to put parentheses. It is squared. I do need to put that there, and then I have to put the minus 3. But what I'm going to put in the parentheses is what g of x was. G of x was this 3x plus 1. So let's put that right in there. Okay, that means I have to figure out that. Now, I had multiplied this out, if you remember, and this came out to be, this was a 9x squared plus a 6x, and then with the minus 3, it came out to be a minus 2. Now, that equals 8. Well, how are we going to solve for x? This actually brings up another topic that I'm going to go over, you must know, is we're solving quadratics. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to subtract the 8 from both sides. Then you're going to have a 9x squared plus the 6x, and now we have a minus, x is there, minus 10, and that is equal to 0. I'm going to take this up there. Now, I know this is not going to factor, it just won't. So what do we do when we have, this is a quadratic, and we want to solve for a 0. So putting it up here, remember the quadratic formula, which you definitely want to know coming in because they will not give it to you, is the opposite of b, plus or minus. You've got the square root of the b squared, take away 4 times a times c, and we do that all over 2 times a. So what do I know about a, b, and c? Okay, so a is the number in front of the x squared. Okay, so I know that my a in this problem is 9. B is the number in front of the x term, so I know my b is 6, and then c is that last term, so this one, c is the negative 10. So I'm going to do the quadratic formula down here, and which is the x will equal the opposite of b, means a negative 6 plus or minus automatically, then you write your square root. Now I'm going to square the b, so I'm going to square that 6, which is a 36. It's an automatic minus sign there, minus. Then notice we have 4 times a times c, so I'll go 4, parentheses. The a was the 9, the c is a negative 10. Now this is all underneath there. So this is over 2 times a, which was a was 9, so it's 18. Okay, now we've got to compute what's inside underneath this square root. We have a 36, take away, so let me do this here. We have a 36 taking away, and then we have a 4 times a 9 times a negative 10. That I know comes out to be negative 360. So what's underneath there, we have a 36 minus a negative 360, so it's plus a 360. That is going to come out to be a 396. That's what's underneath that root. So they may give you, they may simplify this, whatever, that's another lesson, but we have a negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 396, and that's all over the 18. Now, this is a little bit exaggerated. This is a little bit complicated for one of these problems because I'm now incorporating the quadratic formula, but you get the idea. When they actually give you an answer to these problems, you have to set up the composite function and solve.